Good afternoon. Welcome to Senior Living 101. This is the second of a three-part series. And in this particular webinar, we will be addressing assisted living and memory care. If you don't know who we are already, we are the Ageless Living Collaborative, and we are a group of industry leaders who are passionately dedicated to creating optimum outcomes for seniors. Today, our panel includes Alicia Jones of West End Interiors, Dale Miller, Daring by Design, Kevin Swanson, Columbia Pacific Advisors, Laura Busalacci of Brookdale Senior Living, and I will be moderating today's session. I'm Phoebe Stein, president of Olive Presents and co-founder of Ageless Living Collaborative. My co-founder, David Ashton of Dash Design, will be running the back end of the presentation today. So you won't hear from him specifically, but he will be helping us to share all of the imagery and make sure that our mics don't go out. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to assisted living communities. And we start with this image of assisted living and of memory care. So we might ask, which is which? So let's delve right into it and ask, how is it different to design for assisted living and memory care? And how's that different from independent living? Dale, could you kick us off, please?
Sure. I would say, and I'm guessing, that the photo on the left is more simplistic and more than likely memory care, because we try to use simple patterns and appropriate lighting and not too busy a floor or a background.
I am going to say that that image on the right is in fact assisted living. So you were right. No prizes today though. How common is it for assisted living communities to also have a memory care element for residents? Laura?
Afternoon. It's fairly common. We see around, can be up to 60% of the residents in assisted living can have some sort of dementia. So we want to keep that in mind if you're doing renovation work. Obviously, new construction, you're not going to have those conversations, but even in independent living, you can have folks with some sort of dementia.
Would anybody else like to weigh in on that? Because I think that there is a perception out there that independent living is one thing and one thing only, that you really are able to care for yourself, take care of your daily needs, and go on about your business. But that's not always the case. Would any of you like to enumerate on how that could be a different scenario?
With independent living, I think, you know, I do interiors for another company that does do mostly independent or senior apartments, and they do not have a nurse on site or any of those type of employees, a nurse assistant or anybody. So that's a really big difference between assisted living, where you do have a full-time nurse, you have caregivers, and I'm not sure I'm answering your question, Phoebe, so sorry.
No, you are indeed, because I think that there is that perception, and then if somebody sees someone with, say, a walker or maybe in a wheelchair, they think, ooh, wait a second, is this independent living? And so I think it's important for people to understand that assisted does come with some other facets that are vastly different from independent living, absolutely. And having a nurse on site is certainly one of them.
Correct, it is. You know, a number of independent communities will have like a nurse, at-home nurse that's maybe has an office in the building for any needs that they have. However, that's probably the biggest difference is with independent, you don't always have that on-site nursing care to help you out.
Well, Speaking of helping you out then, maybe we could go right into different levels of care in assisted living communities. Are there differences? And if so, what are they, Alicia?
Yes, there are a few different opportunities for different types of nursing staff. Some larger communities may have a full-time nursing staff available. Smaller communities may have visiting nurses that come in. So there's definitely different levels of assisted living care. Some assisted living may lend itself more to, I think some operators call it a crossings program, where there is light Alzheimer's within that assisted living. So things are designed around that. So there are several different types across the country.
It certainly doesn't mean that the design is in any way downgraded, though. We're looking at an assisted living image right now, and it's lovely, and you wouldn't be able to tell a difference. Are there any things that you can point to that would be tip-offs that, in fact, it would be assisted living?
Who are you asking?
I was asking Alicia.
Okay. Yes, there are things, but it could easily be an independent living as well. So I think it's a beautiful assisted living interpretation, and I don't really recall or see anything in particular that calls it out as being an assisted living.
Laura, can you tell me of an instance where you might say, oh, I can see that this is assisted living because of X?
I think if you do the design right, you're not going to be able to necessarily tell the difference. Does that make sense? So
It makes sense, and I think that's a beautiful answer, because I would hope that you would have a gorgeous community to live in, whether your needs were that of independent or assisted.
exactly.
I think that's great. How common is it for assisted living communities to have memory care residents? Laura, do you think is it a 60-40 balance, a 50-50 balance, or is the memory care piece usually about, a smaller margin?
I think it depends. I mean, your residents, if it's an existing community, they're aging in place. So until they get to a certain point where the care can't be handled at that particular assisted living and they need to move to a higher care level, that's when the move takes place. Therefore, if it's an existing community, you can have up to, maybe 60%. So you have to be very cognitive of asking questions if you're going into a community and doing a renovation, and find out how ambulatory they are and what the cognitive acuity is.
Dale, would you like to add to that?
Yes, something that we need to keep in mind at all times is a memory support unit is usually a licensed unit that meets very special requirements. And most senior living is overseen by ACA, but very strict requirements for memory support that must be adhered to. There's also a limit to the amount of residents that can be in a memory care unit based upon the size of the building and the number of residents.
Understand. I want to talk a little bit about murals, because there seem to be a lot of murals in memory care environments. And I wanted to ask about the meaning behind that. Do you want to continue with that, Laura, and talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, I mean,
I want to jump into those sunflowers.
There's a lot of municipalities that the fire marshals are very adamant that these are not installed. It's a means of hiding egress, and that's frowned upon. From a memory care standpoint, viewpoint, it's deceiving because it looks like you can just run through the sunflowers and you can't. You know, I oppose murals. I think they're more trickery. Some of them, yeah, so you've got a hand sanitizer in the boat that you can't get to, and the elevator buttons are inside the boat. I mean, it doesn't, you know,
Right.
that one doesn't really make any.
Wow, I didn't even see the elevator buttons. Thanks for pointing those
Yeah.
out. Okay. Well,
And
that
I-
makes sense.
So, and that one, those are exit doors, and it looks, I mean, I walk out onto the balcony and see the ocean. You can't. I mean, they're not supposed to leave that space. So,
I could see people
yeah.
maybe walking into those too.
Right, yeah.
So when we do it right, there's another way to stimulate memories by design. Dale, would you like to share? I know that you shared with us a story at one point about, and it was so meaningful and it made so much sense, about using art to stimulate memories so that the residents know where they are.
Yes. This particular photo illustrates that very point. If we think about the age and era of the people who are living in senior living, in this case, it's an assisted living community, and some people have some memory issues. We worked with an artist who understood where we were coming from in the fact that illustrating music within the music area and people of that era, like Louis Armstrong, would probably bring a smile to many people's faces and stimulate memories for them. We had another experience in this community as well, and it's an interesting study and something that I learned a good deal about a woman who lived in this community. So it was the day before we were opening, and I was walking down the hall, and a woman stopped me, and she said, you know, I just moved in, and I have no idea where my apartment is. So we began to talk about her and her life, and what she had done, and her children and grandchildren. And it reminded me about how we got started on this project. There was an artist who I wanted to work with because he does very graphic art, very distinctive. His name is Oren Sherman. And both of us started to research memory and how art and color affect people as they develop Alzheimer's or dementia. And we found a study that took place at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And on a Monday, when the museum is typically closed, they invited a group of residents from a member support community in New York City to come and visit the museum. And most of the residents that were part of this unit were no longer verbal in their communication. But they walked in and they showed them around, and as they walked through the galleries, they started to see a lot of animation in people's faces. And all of a sudden, someone who was no longer verbal began to speak and identify the particular artist of a piece of art that he was standing in front of, and several others did the very same thing. And this really gave us a great idea about what we could do to try to help people jog their memories about where their apartment is beyond having their name on a nameplate near the door. So as I was walking along with this woman and she was telling me about her life, and I asked her, what's your name? And she said, my name is Rose Cohen. And I looked directly behind her, and her name was on a placard next to a picture. And I said, Rose, turn around. And this picture with the roses in the vase was the marker that she could use to find her apartment. And she got so excited and said, I will never forget where I live, because you have roses right at my front door. And each apartment had a different significant piece of art. No two were alike. We might have changed the colors or the format, but it gives you food for thought about how we can help people to use these types of things as wayfinders to their apartments, to the music room, to the dining room. And I think it's another way that we can help people stimulate their memories.
Let's go. I think that's wonderful, and it's a great wayfinding that is maybe something that could be adapted for every resident in memory care, so that there's something that, in fact, reminds them of their passion, and it's right outside their door. That's really a lovely idea. I know I've seen the window boxes. Are the window boxes with different pieces from a resident's past? Are those still a thing? Are they vogue still? Laura, can you talk to that?
Yep, they are still a thing. Yeah, yeah. So they are usually filled with the residents' photos, memorabilia, things to help more the associates be able to identify and have conversations with, really more than the resident per se identifying. It's more of a conversation starter for associates.
I didn't even know that. I thought it was to remind somebody where they lived. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about colors and patterns and textures and specific to memory support. And I think maybe we start here, right, Dale?
I think that's a great place to start. So if we look at the colors that are utilized in this particular image, you'll see lots of blues and greens, which are calming. This is an area where people are getting physical therapy. You need to be very cautious about the patterns and colors that you use for several reasons. One is that as your eyes age, the lens of your eye begins to yellow, and therefore you see colors in a different way. So a vibrant blue would actually look more like aqua, and red like orange, and so on. And so we have to be cautious about that. One color we learned never to use is purple, because if you look at it through yellow glasses, you'll see what the residents see, which is kind of a muddy gray brown sort of color. And then when it comes to patterns, the caution should be there as well. And that has to do with things that are especially in the carpet. Try not to do big dark splotches because people might think that they're holes. Also, think about your pattern. It's lovely to do leaves and vines, but often the vines could be mistaken for worms or snakes and very frightening to residents in our communities.
I'm going to break here for just a moment and encourage the folks who are participating in the webinar, if they would like to ask questions, please use the chat or the Q&A, and I will see those questions and ask our panelists to field them. I know that question has come up a couple of times now. I'm going to ask a question since we are in a dining facility. This comes from a visitor to the webinar today. Have you seen the need for dining partitions in facilities? We call them communities. Or is there less of a concern because it's more of a controlled environment versus a restaurant? Who would like to take that?
I can
Alicia,
touch on that.
there you go.
You know, prior to COVID, we didn't really have the partitions. Of course, now we are thinking more along those lines. Within these environments, especially in memory care, you do see, as you do in this photograph, the tables are pretty much have a good clearance in between, anywhere from 6 feet, 5 to 6 feet, sometimes up to 7 and 8 feet. And that's so the residents can get around easily between the tables and if they're passing by someone. So it's a safer passerby area to do this. As far as partitions now, we are having some operators that are requesting that and them to be placed around some of the environment, but not as much in the dining rooms when they are spread as they are in this photograph. And very good point. It is a controlled environment, more so in the memory care. So we're not seeing as much needed because of that. Everyone is being tested every day and making sure that everyone is following the correct rules for
Great.
the
And
coronavirus.
I'm not sure that Mike at KMA was really thinking specifically about COVID or not, but that's a really good point. And as we, go deeper into the fall, are there additional precautions that you see coming together in memory care and assisted living insofar as the dining rooms are concerned? And are we ready to discuss those yet? Laura?
We've been pushing tables together to provide better social distancing opportunities. The dining capacity is reduced, so it's not having every resident in the dining room at the same time, just to make sure that there is social distancing. So between those two and the typical cleaning and that disinfecting and that kind of thing, that's how there really hasn't been a lot of partitions, at least not
Right.
yet. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows what the future holds?
Right. Stay tuned.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
Let's kind of move on to life skills and life skill stations. I know they were at one time a big deal. Are they still? And if not, what's replaced them? Kevin, can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, of course. So currently you're looking at a couple of life skill stations I've recently done. And I kind of have the luxury with our buildings that they actually build in small spaces for these areas throughout the memory care community in the corridors and at other areas. So this is a travel one. The previous one was music. So what I typically do is I meet with our operator before every project gets going. So word to the designers out there is, if you're going to be doing a memory care neighborhood, really talk with them. That's a nice ladder. Sorry, that's my photo. This is an office, but I believe this was for this was sort of the government area for a Sacramento building, of course, the capital of California. Anyway, so speak with the operators and see what they do. I know that there's a variety of different things that they do. We happen to provide them with these sort of spaces and they kind of call out what they'd like. And so of course in Sacramento, we did sort of a Capitol sort of office for the Capitol. We did a music one here. And I provide them with just sort of the basics. Here, this is a glider chair. They can sit, the operator has a music program that they will listen to with iPads and whatnot. And so they can casually rock and listen to music. Of course, we kind of give them the idea this is sort of the music area by the artworks and the accessories and whatnot around. The map one is more for travel in the area. I do provide them with all these little pamphlets from the hotel I stay at. If you see there on the left, on a little turnaround brochure holder, a map of the area. I think this is Pennsylvania. That looks like a Pennsylvania map there. And a globe. Again, what I kind of give them the bones, and then the operations takes it from there, and they can kind of guide a resident through, hey, where have you traveled? Hey, isn't this a beautiful place to be? Or whatever. So I think what it has evolved from a very particular activity has evolved into maybe more of an operations activity that is maybe guided by them. I know that there's a lot of other variety of life skill stations out there as well that will directly impact, or they can take one individual thing to a resident that might need to be redirected. But this is kind of what we do, and then I let the operations take it on. But having that conversation with the operator is key of what they would like to see.
Thank you. Alicia, I know that there are some other memory engagement activities, and I know that you have pioneered some and refined some. Do you want to add to that?
Yes, and I think Kevin spoke very well on that. In the past, years ago, I think the life skills were more glitchy, and now if you see those, they tend to be more outdated, where Kevin has, and as he mentioned, just having operations involved and creating spaces for this use versus a little corner that has, railing with rockers and just being more themed. I think the different ones that we provide, our operators, go from the parenting to the sewing. We have a collection for kitchenette supplies, and that's where the staff will possibly make cookies and have the residents roll the cookie dough out. So it's an interactive activity. Some operators have gotten away from doing some of these things. They don't want, they want their staff more engaged, and they don't want to utilize just those for the staff, just to send them away and send the residents over to the life skills, and just so they're not having to spend time with them. So some operators are for it, some are against it, but I think just having clean life skills stations that work with the variety of residents that you have in the communities is always a plus.
Thank you. Laura, do you want to add to that what you guys are doing at Brookdale vis-a-vis life skills for memory care?
I think it's all kind of incorporated. There's a lot of, like Alicia was saying, it's not like a station that they're going to necessarily engage on their own, depending on the level of dementia, what type of dementia that they have. So
is a caregiver more coaching them? Is a caregiver walking through the steps?
Or activities person, could be, depending on, if somebody is being bathed, part of the quote unquote life skill would be getting ready afterwards, and making sure your hair is nice, and if they want to get some makeup on, or if they don't, and so just going through those typical steps that we do really every day. You're just making that interactive.
Thank you. Dale, I saw you'd like to add to this.
One of the most popular days at a particular community that we've worked on is Beauty Day, as Laura was just mentioning. And they asked us to build really simple manicure tables. And so staff would help the women with their manicures, and then they'd ask about hair and makeup and things like that. And no matter how old you are or what your memory is like, I think every woman still wants to look beautiful.
True. We're going to take a break for questions here. We've got a bunch of them stacking up, so I'm going to ask everybody to let me know who wants to respond. I have a question from Tyler Hagens. What sort of attributes or key design elements are you looking for in lounge or ancillary furniture? Kevin, you want to take a stab here?
Yeah, thanks. If I'm going to try to interpret this question a little bit of the attributes to what you want to look for in memory care furniture, especially, is we don't want a bunch of really, really soft, flouncy cushions, I don't think. And so I work with a manufacturer that has more of a tight seat sofa, but what it does, it kind of reverse lifts like a hood of a car. And they called it a clean out. And so the whole cushion is on a hinge. It will pull forward. They can clean it out. This is, of course, if there's an accident. So if someone doesn't make it to the bathroom, or just in regular cleaning, there's certain areas for you're in, let's say, to go to the floor versus staying on the sofa, or just an ease of cleaning it out if there's anyone that has an accident. I noticed there was a question, and Phoebe, I don't mean to jump ahead, but regarding recliners and whatnot. And so
I know, I was getting to that. That was going to be the next one. What are your thoughts on recliners for assisted living versus memory care? I heard that in some states they could be considered restraining devices if the resident isn't able to get themselves out. That was a question from an anonymous attendee. Go ahead.
So what you're looking at now, this lovely orange chair, that's an actual glider rocker, and it does lock as they get up out of it, so it won't rock as they're getting up and out. But I use these instead of recliners. The restraint thing, this is my own interpretation of what is happening. If someone is in a recliner, typically the recliner probably doesn't have the appropriate fabric on it. If it's a retail recliner brought in by a resident, it doesn't have the moisture barrier if they happen to have an accident in it. So that's the first thing. If someone's in it and they don't have the strength to get themselves out and they have to go to use the restroom or whatnot, they're going to end up having an accident there because they are considered stuck in that chair. My little story is that the moment they have that happen, guess who is walking in as a family member? And now my mom has been restrained in this recliner, blah, blah, and she couldn't get out. I tend to use ottomans instead of a recliner, and I go on the faith that a resident understands what an ottoman is, and or if they do need an ottoman to lift their feet up, it is brought out by a caregiver for them to sit in a chair and then put their feet up. These glider rockers I think are great because they give you the motion that you need sometimes with a recliner, and it really soothes them down if you need them. But that's my thoughts on it.
It doesn't trap them.
It doesn't trap them. They can get out of this just as easy as anything. Good seat height, good arm, firm cushion. They can lift themselves right out.
Fabulous. Thank you, Kevin. Dale?
Yes, in full agreement with what Kevin had to say, and we've discovered that using a glider for memory care is soothing, and most people really like them. Recliners, you need to look at the mechanism and how people are going to operate them. And we've discovered that it's much simpler for people to have a cord and a control than it is to have switches on the inside of the arm, especially if you're a bit on the infirm side and you really can't manipulate very well. And so if you have a cord that has buttons on it, it's really easy to raise and lower it. And to be sure also that the recliner that you're using is very firm, very steady, and tip-proof, because there have been times, as has been mentioned, where that resident is falling out of the recliner just as their family is walking in.
Horrible. That would just be awful. Well, let's shift our attention now to the floor. I want to talk a little bit about wood-looking vinyls being used more and more in memory care environments. And is that the way to go? What are the pros and cons? Laura.
Hot topic that everybody very, very, very passionate about. So I think the wood-looking vinyl planks or sheet, everybody's more using the plank than anything else, is appropriate in certain locations. So my philosophy is that any wet areas, the dining room, craft area, the lobby, vestibule area, all appropriate, great uses for it. Going down corridors, if the dining rooms are too big, then I would say a no-go. If memory care, really, we've got vinyl plank, even in the assisted livings in the dining rooms. But the carpet really softens. It's great acoustical perspective on it. It also helps with particulates that are in the air from having it blow around. So just think if your house has tile or wood and you've got pets, you know, all the little fur that just kind of blows around the floor. There's a misnomer, or yeah, I'll use misnomer, that the vinyl is easier to clean. And in theory, it is. But we actually did a time study, and if you do clean the vinyl correctly, therefore you're going back over it with a rinse, it is more time consuming to clean the vinyl than it is to clean carpet.
Yeah.
So I
So
think,
what about people's perception that, oh, carpet can be more dirty than wood or vinyl?
you got to clean them both. So I think there's a
You
lot
gotta
of education that needs to take place that I know collectively we are all trying our best to keep educating and educating. You know, carpet, if you look at it like your clothes, you wash your clothes, you gotta vacuum your carpet. You gotta keep it clean. If you've got a spot on your clothes, you're gonna treat the spot, you're gonna wash it. It's the same thing with carpet. It's a fabric, it's a fiber.
And it's going to give you some sound dampening as well.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
Anybody else want to add to the flooring conversation before we move on?
I think Laura really has it well. You know,
Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I mean,
Sorry.
sorry. I mean, I think either one can be really well used in both memory care and or assisted living. Like she said, a lot of people think it'd be kept cleaner. It isn't as hard to soil, but you can really get into trouble if you aren't cleaning it. I often worry about with the wandering going on in memory care neighborhoods, when they're cleaning this floor, that they're keeping the residents out and it can become much more slippery. Not that carpet isn't slippery when wet, but I'm going to guess that carpet is probably less wet than at times than the vinyl is when they're trying to clean it. So there's always this one side or the other. I think aesthetically it looks great. It's just there's also the sound issue.
Yeah. I think too that, you know, when it's used in units and, you know, a lot of folks want to have it in the units. Some people still have the thought that you can throw an area rug down, and you can't by code. So keeping that in mind, that we want it to be home-like, we want it to be warm, we want it to be comfortable, but there's still code considerations that need to take place. And when you clean the vinyl, we got to make sure we're cleaning it with the right stuff, because if you use the wrong stuff, it starts to get sticky and tacky, and it attracts the dirt. Just like when you clean the carpet incorrectly, it will get sticky and attract the dirt. I've got stuck on both materials. So over the course of my career, gross thinking about it.
I've
Okay.
experienced the same.
If anybody has any flooring specific questions, please feel free to write them in the Q&A and we'll try and answer them during the session. We're going to talk a little bit about outdoor spaces, and that is of course as important in some geographic areas as the indoors. But even in Chicago, outdoor is still important to a community and to its residents. What is important about designing outdoor spaces for memory care? Kevin, can you kick this off?
Oh, excuse me, sorry. Yes, I think with memory care, it's important that they have a space to walk and to experience when they're outside. In this photo, I see a nice planter box there. Have an activity that they can go out and do outside. And of course, it's always important to do shade. They need a nice smooth walking surface where they aren't going to trip. I guess that's probably good for everybody, probably even myself at times outside. So keeping all of that in mind, we also want to be sure that, especially with memory care and sometimes the need to wander, we want to be sure that, of course, it's a safe area, that they are not going to leave the property, go out into the street or somewhere and potentially get hurt that way. A big thing a lot of people don't always remember is we got to put edible plants out there. There's many times I've been in the installation or been somewhere, I said, can they eat that? And if they can't eat that and not get sick, then that needs to be replaced. And so not only do we need to make it look great, but it has to taste great, I guess. I'm not sure. But and those are my thoughts on outdoor space. It's an important space to be able to wander, relax, enjoy a meal, and maybe have an activity.
Alicia?
Yes, one thing to keep in mind too, it's very important to keep the space secure for memory care. So the fencing, the gating needs to be, I think, 6 to 8 feet. You can, if there's spacing in between, like wooden slats, you know, residents have been known to escape and to get out of those spaces. So this is a good example of just a closed space where the residents can be safe. Covering from the sun is hugely important, regardless of what region that you're in. I think some of the outdoor vendors have done a great job in fabricating the larger 9, 10, 12 inch or 12-foot umbrellas that are cantilevered. So when you can't maybe have umbrellas at every table, you can put 1 or 2 of those out, so at least the residents can get refuge from the sunlight. So those as well are important. We have some operators that stream the misting systems, which is always a great touch to add to the memory care, or any resident. It doesn't matter if it's independent living or your own home. That's always a nice touch.
Love those. I kind of look forward to them. I wonder if they cause any confusion though. If it's memory care, is there ever a question as to where that mist came from?
It's really fine. So I'm going to say no. I mean, it's really fine.
I mean, they make it so much more.
We've never been asked. That's a very
Yeah,
good
I haven't
question,
heard,
but
I've never heard anything either. Yeah.
Dale, would you like to add to the conversation on outdoor living? Coming from the Sunshine State, I would think you have a lot to share with us.
Perhaps. One of the things that we find to be very important is to have a circuitous route so that people can have a continuous path walking all the way around and not having a stopping point. Because there are people who have memory issues that would prefer to have that route and just keep circling around and around and around. It gives them comfort. So that's a key point just as well. Level floor. It's wonderful to do a beautiful outdoor space, but if you have rocks and pebbles and uneven flooring, you may have a trip and fall, and that equally could be dangerous. And certainly for plants, maybe they need to be vegetables as opposed to plants that might be edible, or have things available there so that people can stop if they want to and do some planting under supervision, especially if you're someone who's had a garden in your life. I think it would stimulate wonderful memories for people to be able to plant something and then keep a watch on it or point it out to them. Do you remember you planted those flowers last week and look, they're sprouting, and it puts a smile on the resident's face.
That all makes sense. Certainly.
Pollinator garden area is good too.
Pardon me?
Oops. I said having a pollinator area is good too.
yes. We had a recent install where the operator, well, it was the executive director's idea, but they planted a butterfly garden. And I have before and after photographs. And the before photographs, which I took probably 5 years ago, no resident was sitting out there. And we were there a few weeks ago for the install, for the final furniture install. And there were probably 8 to 10 residents sitting there, just, you know, watching the butterflies and enjoying the the garden. It was
Yeah.
most definitely a beautiful sight.
Yeah.
That sounds wonderful. Well, I'm going to go back to the questions because they keep coming in. And we are going to digress back to flooring. I know that's not a surprise to any of you. We have a question, what kind of carpet is most common in senior living? Now, we're talking about assisted living today and memory care, but can we address what is the preferred type of carpeting for the three?
Okay, take
You
a
look
stab.
like you're ready to answer.
Sorry.
The at low pile, dense, you want to be able to move across it. So no shag, no cut pile in the common areas unless it's very short and dense. Usually moisture barrier backing. There's manufacturers that have breathable moisture barrier. So the slab can breathe, but anything coming from above can't penetrate through. And, 100% solution dyed nylon, so you can aggressively clean it. And anybody else?
I think what I wanted to say, sorry, Dale, if I just might make a point, is carpet tiles. I know that a lot of hospitality designers love carpet tiles, and I know a lot of senior designers do as well. My only fear is, especially in memory care, is, let me go back for a moment. Yes, with carpet tile, if a piece gets dirty, you can pull it out and put a new one in. But if you've seen that done at an airport, it looks dirty, and then you have this shiny square that's just,
Glossy.
look at me, I'm brand new. That doesn't always work in your house. Would you put tile in your house? And so, and also you have a seam every 18 inches where potentially urine or any other moisture can get into the subfloor. So I'm always using broadloom carpets. To Laura's point, yes, dense. Pattern in memory care cannot be too much. We talked about that as well. I had a scenario where everyone thought it was snakes and I wanted to run away and never come back again. We don't use borders really much at all in memory care. They will tend to see that as a whole, even if it's light or dark, and try to step over. They have tripping. I know borders are kind of going out of sort of fashion right now anyway, so that's probably a good thing with memory care. Dale, go ahead. You had your hand.
You talked about the concrete, which is usually what's under the floor. If you're doing a renovation, we highly recommend that a moisture test be done on the slab before you begin to install anything. It will protect you, it will protect the carpet vendor, and it will protect the end user just as well. So that's extremely important. Now, I do have a hint about carpet tiles. If you notice that you have one that you need to remove and replace, take one from a corner or an inobtrusive spot and replace it with that one, because it's been in the same lighting and in the same area for quite some time. So it won't appear to be that one thing that really stands out to your eyes. And if you continue to do it that way, it does work. I do have the same feeling that Kevin has, however, and that has to do with those seams and moisture. So have a good installer working on the project so that you don't face that challenge.
I'm glad you both address carpet tiles, because that is yet another question that just came up. People are interested in whether or not that's appropriate for assisted living and memory care. Now we're going to
I'll
go.
add something to that, Phoebe.
Alicia?
I wanted to add one thing to that.
Sure.
With the carpet tiles, we tend to stay away from them as well. The small percentage of time that we do use carpet tiles is in possibly a smaller room where there is a lot of furniture placed. So you're not going to see all the seaming and all of that. More times than not, we have the luxury vinyl plank, in activity rooms. But if we have activity rooms or the operator prefers carpet for sound or possibly when art is done and there's a sink in there, you know, just to prevent slipping or anything like that, that would be an environment that we would use the carpet tiles. But again, very rare that we do.
I do have one more question about flooring, and I've not heard of this, but I'm sure you all have. The question is, what about Flotex? It's a carpet that can be hosed down and hold up to traffic.
I
It's a
do have
type of
experience.
carpet tile. I'm imagining it's a type of tile because it comes in 48 by 48, so tiles size.
It also comes in a sheet good as well. And we have used it in 2 different projects, one that's actually being installed this week, and it is in a theater room where they also serve refreshments. So they wanted some soundproofing there, but something that's easily cleaned. We've had good success. There are fewer patterns and colorways possibly available than we would like, but and some operators get creeped out just by the feel and the texture because it does feel like a wool product almost. But as far as the maintenance of it, it does maintain well and is easily to clean.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to go into a final question because we're almost running out of time. So I want to get some feedback from you all about distinguishing between the differences and what we know as a nursing home from an assisted living community. And let's do this in a rapid fire manner. Differences between nursing home and assisted living community. Kevin.
The difference, you have just as many caregivers as you probably do residents. When it comes to interiors, your population is going to be of all ages because they're there for rehab as well as end of life. I guess I would probably design with less furniture because we may have more people in a wheelchair situation or in some sort of mobile device. The cleanability might come into factor, but I wouldn't try to do it too much different.
Okay. Dale?
I prefer to use the term skilled nursing to nursing home. And I think that's the correct terminology today. Something to consider is that we never lose sight of the fact that it is someone's home. And so we try to make it as home-like as possible so that people can feel comfortable. And being aware of the colors and textures that we use, being sure that we have good separation in terms of color and textures, and that we can have comfortable furniture for not just the residents, but for their guests. And the final thing is that sometimes the grandchildren come to visit also. So we try to have a little something that would be appreciated by a single-digit child who might remember about that monkey that was painted on the wall, or a teenager who sees a tiny little picture of their favorite music group, so that everybody feels welcome.
Laura?
I think there's regulatory differences. You know, a lot of times the skilled environments are more the sheet vinyl, more the vinyl plank, you know, more needing to be materials that can be cleaned with bleach versus, you know, the senior living environment really tries to not have bleach in those environments just because of the dementia aspect. You do not want somebody taking a gulp out of a hazardous chemical. So, you know, it's hard surface, aggressively cleaned and disinfected surfaces, I think are more in the skilled environment than they are in the assisted living and memory care environment.
Alicia, you get to have the last word.
I agree with Dale. I do say that the skilled nursing is a preferred term over nursing home these days. And as far as the difference in the environments, I know with the skilled nursing, you do have care around the clock. Not all assisted living environments have that. As far as the furnishings and the design, I agree with whatever everyone said. You do want to maybe spread out the furniture because there do tend to be more wheelchairs and walkers in the skilled nursing environments. However, you also want whatever furniture is there to definitely be very welcoming and comfortable, to feel like a home for them, and also to incorporate things for the grandkids and the guests that come to visit.
Thank you all so much for today's conversation about assisted living and memory care. I want to remind everybody who is joining us today that the third part of the series, Senior Living 101, will be held on October 21st. You can always catch up on missed webinars by going to the ALC website, agelesslivingcollaborative.org. And I want to thank David Ashen for running the back end of this presentation and showing all the beautiful images. Speaking of images, we will have a gallery section on the website where you will be able to go and see independent living, assisted living, and memory care images, and a little bit about each one of those communities and the designers behind it. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.